Mr. Colin feels it would be a little unkind to present this picture without just a word of friendly warning. We are about to unfold the story of Frankenstein, a man of science who sought to create a man after his own image without reckoning upon God. It is one of the strangest tales ever told. It deals with the two great mysteries of creation, life and death. I think it will thrill you. It may shock you. It might even horrify you. So if any of you feel that you do not care to subject your nerves to such a strain, now is your chance to, well, we've warned you.
Welcome to the Scariest Things podcast, your gateway to the tropes and trends of the horror genre. This is episode 146, and if you didn't pick up on it from that clever opener, we're talking about Frankenstein tonight. This is Mike Campbell. Frankenstein, and I'm joined by...
monster.
Eric Lee.
And...
Liz Williams.
All right, so here, just to start us off, are you guys? I know a lot of people like a lot of soccer fans hate the fact that people refer to soccer as soccer and they don't call it football. Are you okay calling the Frankenstein monster Frankenstein?
Yeah,
yeah.
For this, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I think that
because I know some people they're like, no, Frankenstein's monster is not Frankenstein.
It's
right.
It's the monster.
Right.
He's the monster. He's not Frankenstein.
He's not a
Frankenstein's the
doctor.
doctor. It's Victor von Frankenstein.
Yep.
But you're okay with that?
I am. I think
You're
it's
forgiving.
Yeah, and I think that it's so buried in the culture.
Yeah.
Yes.
For sure. Oh my God. Yeah.
He's Frankie.
Yeah.
And I've, from a little kid, it is one of the very first monsters
Yeah. Oh yeah.
It's
Yep.
That's true.
Dracula, Frankenstein, the Mummy, and it
Right.
comes in your Frankenberries.
Right.
You get you find out you start to recognize that these are these one-time scary monsters are now kind of the lovable archetypes. But they if you look at the types or the tropes of the Frankenstein monster, it's essentially it's a mad science experiment.
Sure.
Right. And in addition to, so just for everybody who was listening at the intro, that is Edward Van Sloan, who plays Van Helsing in Dracula. He's also he plays a role in Frankenstein. He usually he's a universal player. And
1931's Frankenstein.
1931.
Yeah.
And so he steps out in front of the velvet curtain and does an announcement because this is, one of the very first talkie horror movies.
Right.
And it was a huge success. Launched a genre because it was so successful. Launched the career of Boris Karloff.
Yep.
And James Whale, and and every 20 to 30 years, actually more like 20 years, you get someone tries to take another crack at the foundational story, and so it's clearly it's not a zombie movie,
right?
And I think it's usually a singular creation of cobbled parts of dead bodies brought to life through electricity, and in one of the great bits that is in front of the Bride of Frankenstein, you have Elsa Lanchester, who plays not just the bride. Famously, she's the bride with that wonderful hairdo and the shock and the scream, where you only see her actually for 5 minutes maybe.
Yeah,
in the whole movie. But she also opens up and she's playing Mary Wollstonecraft Shelley.
Yeah,
and she has this quote in there. It says, "My publishers did not see that my purpose was to write." Did not see that my purpose was to write a moral lesson of the punishment that befell upon mortal men who dared to emulate God.
Right.
And that was really, that really was what Shelley was trying to do at the time. It was not about, it's like, bring the a monster to life, but it was playing God.
Right.
And so, I think that's,
Now, have you read Frankenstein?
I have.
When I was
I have too.
Yeah, when I was in high school.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I had to read it in like my first year in college.
Right.
Yeah.
And
I love the book.
yeah.
I think the book is.
Yeah.
I think the book is still a lasting great piece of literature.
I love the 31 movie.
Yeah.
I love Bride of Frankenstein. I think they're
Right.
both the two of those together are, universally,
Yeah.
no pun intended,
Bah,
Mhm.
bah, bah.
classics.
Yeah.
And they should be. And and I think one of the other things that's lasting about Frankenstein, and I think this is because of Boris Karloff, is that he's the sympathetic monster.
Sure.
He's still a killer,
Right.
but it's like, when there's moments in the 31 film where Fritz starts hitting him with a torch. It's like, don't hit. And it's probably actually, Dwight Fry actually
Yeah.
hitting Boris Karloff with a lit torch because at that time there was like the stuntman kind of things like, go. We'll put some water on his outfit and you just hit him with a torch and he'll be fine. But that he would snarl and growl and swing at things, but he was a dopey, kind of somewhat lovable monster who would get scary at a moment's notice. Like I think it's and that he's become lovable to generations later, kind of like Godzilla, right?
Well, and so I would argue this. I think there is no more recognizable horror character on the planet ever made than Frankenstein. I think
Probably.
I think the Frankenstein story at its most pure is probably the most pure embodiment of. I mean, this is like the Black Sabbath of heavy metal, right? Everything emanates from Black Sabbath, right? I think everything emanates from. I don't think it emanates from Dracula because that's its own jam. I think, however, everything in horror emanates from Frankenstein. And I think it is also probably the greatest foundational piece to horror. It is all that said, it is my least favorite of all the horror movies. Frankenstein.
Of of all horror movies.
Like
Of
the
all-
old ones?
All of them.
The classics.
All of them. 100%.
Oh.
All of them. I totally dislike it, even though I understand that Frankenstein is such an important and recognizable character throughout all of horror. It is my least favorite. I am so uninterested in the Frankenstein story.
I would agree with you on that.
And yet you were the one who said we should do Frankenstein.
And I was the one that said we should challenge ourselves to do
Oh,
Frankenstein.
you're the one.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
I mean, clocking in, I counted, I mean, there was a couple different lists online you could find of Frankenstein movies, and I think there's probably even more than I found, but I counted upwards of 70 plus Frankenstein films.
With actually the name Frankenstein in it.
With the name Frankenstein in it. In fact, there's even a podcast that I listened to a little bit. Shout out to the Frankencast podcast. They deal exclusively with deep dive into individual Frankenstein movies. And
Wow.
I did listen to one of their introductory podcasts where they were kind of talking about why they are so interested in Frankenstein. It was for many of the reasons you just discussed. How it's God versus man, it's man's inhumanity to man, it's the weird and perverse relationship between Igor and Frankenstein, and bullying aspects, and and how we treat the marginalized in society, and I mean on and on and on and on. Which I think those are all great and fascinating things.
Yep.
I just think the Frankenstein movies are boring as hell.
Oh.
Yeah, I would agree for most of them because they're the same.
Yeah. I will tell you that the ones that I have picked would not qualify as boring.
Mine aren't either, but
Yeah.
mine are also not traditional Frankenstein
Well,
movies.
I'm very
Yeah.
curious to hear what Liz says. I'm sort of I've got a couple of Lincoln back bills in my pocket, ready for Liz to pull out what I'm suspecting she might pull out. But I think for me, I love the Universal movies. I have a love for the old Universal movies.
Yeah.
And not it's not that they're scary, but and at the time they it's funny how the times they are a change, and back in 1930 that people found the concept frightening, and it's interesting that they would do some very clever things about how they shot the movie, where Boris Karloff is only about 6'1".
Yeah.
right? But they put him on, on platform shoes. They gave him additional head height with the kind of the Jack Pierce makeup. So he became like 6'5", and the actors who played against him were smaller, and so he looked enormous. And then he would be showing signs of great strength by breaking out of chains and stuff like that, and making him like he's big scary monster. But a lot of those kinds of techniques that they would use, and the castle and the storm and the electricity and it's alive, that is awesome. I love the Colin Clive stuff. But it ain't scary.
Right.
not in the least nowadays.
Right.
Pause. Battery's running low on the PC. I've got to plug it in. We've been doing this a long time. So I think Frankenstein can be a problematic character because of his place sort of within popular culture.
You think it's because he's like too ubiquitous to be scary anymore?
Well, that they've tried R-rated versions of it.
Yeah.
And that they can make him more violent. I have seen one of mine I have is a modernization that I thought was done exceptionally well.
Okay.
But it is not called Frankenstein.
Oh.
Okay.
But I think if you take a run down the list, and we were sort of talking about it a little bit before. About the time, so that when I'm looking at the major releases of Frankenstein and how often they get done, so there's the 1910 Frankenstein, which very few people have seen.
Right.
It was 31 Whale production. Curse of Frankenstein, 1957, which is the Hammer Fisher movies.
Okay.
You have Young Frankenstein, which is Mel Brooks.
Yeah.
Which is still a straight up Frankenstein story.
Yeah.
You have Frankenstein Unbound in 1990, which is Roger Corman. You get Mary Shelley's Frankenstein 1994 with Branagh.
Yeah.
You got Victor Frankenstein 2015, which is the Harry Potter
right.
McGuigan film. And then they also came out with one that I haven't seen, and I didn't realize that until actually I was cobbling some of my notes together. But there was one called Frankenstein in 2015 with the director Rose.
Okay.
So, would be interesting, but everybody wants to take a crack at it because it's such a well-known thing. But I don't think none of them have been like off the charts successful. Unlike, say, redoing vampire movies, there's been sort of this. I think the recontextualizing the vampire movies has been very successful, and I think werewolf movies have graduated. And if you look at Shape of Water compared to Creature from the Black Lagoon, all those Universal monsters, they come back. Invisible Man came out and had an awesome Invisible Man a couple of years ago.
Well, so I think, as I was saying before, I think the reason why people want to take a crack at it is because it really is a foundation. It is the most foundational piece of horror. Yeah, and like you will find no greater piece that really represents horror than Frankenstein.
I think that it just dawned on me, like a rough equivalent would be Frankenstein is to horror movies what Superman is to I think superhero movies. I think at a certain point,
Black Sabbath is to heavy metal.
Well, I mean, in the fact that sometimes I think it's very, very hard to tell a good Superman story because
right. It's been
it's been done too many times.
It's kind of worn out. And how do you keep that story fresh?
Exactly.
And then sometimes if you monkey with it too much, you get people who go, "That's not Superman."
Right.
And same thing with Frankenstein. It's like, well, it's like. We were just talking about an intellectualized Robert De Niro Frankenstein, which seemed to be too far off base for what the Frankenstein's monster is.
And he doesn't look like Frankenstein.
Yeah.
He just looks like a guy with a head contusion.
Yeah. Robert De Niro in like a dirty coat.
Yeah, Robert De Niro in a dirty coat with stitches on his head is not Frankenstein. Sorry.
So
try again, Mr. Branagh.
Bobby.
Yeah.
All right. So with that, let's get rolling into.
Yeah. Where should we actually start with Frankenstein?
Okay,
these are the 9 movies to start with.
Well,
not the ones you listed.
Let me
the
ask.
Ones we're gonna throw out.
Both of you. Did either of you pick the 31 Frankenstein or the Bride of Frankenstein?
Nope and nope.
Yeah. Okay. So I think a note to everybody, and this includes Liz.
Yeah.
Watch.
I haven't seen it. Yeah.
Watch the James Whale movies.
I'll never see it.
You know, it's like if I will watch Martyrs if you watch the 2 Frankenstein movies.
Deal.
Well,
So
as the mayor of Tropetown, you can compel
That's
us
right.
to
Deal.
do much
Yeah.
anything.
Mayor of Tropetown puts out an edict, and I think that what you have to do is you have to want, of course, when you're watching a movie of that era, you have to understanding what a movie of that era, appreciate it for what it was.
Sure.
Not
That's-
what,
I don't
not
think
up
that's what
against
I
what
can't
you.
do.
Yeah.
That's my problem.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well,
has that
Liz,
problem with
where do we?
anything before 1980?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Liz, where do we
Oh,
start?
no, yeah.
Where do
I'm
we
gonna
start with
start
Frankenstein?
Yep.
with kids, of
course.
course.
Yay.
Of course. Because I'm going to pick the newest entry in the Hotel Transylvania.
I knew it.
Yeah.
Cash on the table.
Transformania. Okay, but Frankenstein has a very big part in this one. So
Wait, is this the one that just came out?
Yeah.
it just came out.
Yep.
Okay, so Hotel Transylvania is a hotel for monsters run by Dracula.
Yep.
who
Yeah.
is normally voiced by Adam Sandler, but not in this movie. He is voiced
Aw.
by a guy named Brian Hull. And in the castle, we've got our standard. We've got Van Helsing, we have Wayne the werewolf, we have Griffin, who's the invisible man, we have Murray, the ancient mummy, and of course we have Frank, who was voiced by Kevin James in the first ones, but now it's an actor named Brad Abrell. And in this chapter, through all sorts of shenanigans, all of the monsters get turned into humans with a crystal ray gun.
Oh, that's right. Yes.
Frankenstein, who kind of looks like an ugly monster with the blockhead and like the kind of crew cut haircut, turns into this like super suave, good looking guy with fancy hair who becomes just obsessed with like taking selfies and how good he looks. And he's the only one who doesn't really want to turn back into a monster. But then they have to go on a journey to find the crystal to put into the ray gun to turn them back. So
Right.
it's silly. Your kids will love it. It's very dumb.
And
But
Hotel
hey.
Transylvania has had it's been
This is
consistently
4
good,
movies.
hasn't
It's
it?
consistently good. This is the last one. It also has a series. It's cute. I mean, it's Adam Sandler, Kevin James, Keegan-Michael Key, Jim Gaffigan, Steve Buscemi, David Spade. It's Fran Drescher. It's big names.
Fran Drescher.
And he
Yeah,
plays the Bride of Frankenstein.
Yeah.
So it's huge names. It's fun. It's fun for your kids. And that's about as much monster stuff that I want to watch. Yeah, I'm not a creature feature guy. I'm not a Universal Monsters fan. So this is where I start.
I just watched this and I was shocked at how many great voices there were and like Steve as soon as Steve Buscemi came on, I was like, oh my God, that's Steve Buscemi. I can't believe Steve Buscemi is in this film. This is nuts.
And my favorite, of course, is Van Helsing though, and his weird little, I don't know. He's like half robot. I don't know. I don't remember how that happened to him, but that's Jim Gaffigan. So
That's right. That's right. Yeah.
It's a good time. And hey, you said it's the first monster that kids will recognize. Well,
Absolutely.
That's keeping up with it. All the kids will recognize these classic Universal monsters. And if you're going to get into scary movies, you got to start somewhere. And these
Hotel
are creepy
Transylvania
and gross.
is a terrific boarding ramp for kids,
little
kids.
For kids. Yep.
Yeah. All right.
So
So
that's where I'm going.
I'm going at the opposite end of the spectrum. This is a film when it came out, it was rated X. Rated X by the
Andy
MPAA because of its explicit sexuality and violence.
I think I know what
This is Andy
Andy
Warhol's Flesh for Frankenstein. Now, I did do a little bit of research because I was trying to figure out the film is actually directed by Paul Morrissey, who went on to do the Dracula one, and he did some other stuff with Joe D'Alessandro. But I was like, what the hell I think Andy Warhol was just kind of
Just like came out of factory, huh?
it was all the factory people, and Andy Warhol was like kind of hanging around, so they were like, let's call it Andy Warhol's Frankenstein. Even though the title Frankenstein appeared on the print itself, it was in I think in West Germany and the United States, it was ultimately released as Andy Warhol's Frankenstein. So this is the 1973 horror film directed by Paul Morrissey, as I mentioned. It's got Udo Kier, Joe Dallesandro, and it involves Baron von Frankenstein, who neglects his duties towards his wife, sister, which is super weird. And he is obsessed with creating the perfect Serbian race to obey his commands, beginning with the perfect female and perfect male parts, but he has all these obviously very weird sexual urges that he oftentimes utilizes the surgical wounds of the female creation to satisfy his sexual urges, which is just as gross as it sounds. But he is dissatisfied with the productions of Frankenstein that he's created, and he is looking for a male creation with the perfect head, and that would also have the perfect libido, and would also have the perfect, correct Serbian shape to the nose to create the master race, because he wants to breed the male Frankenstein and the female Frankenstein. Right. And it is just as wild, just as crazy as you would think it is. Obviously, as I mentioned, Joe Dallesandro did the Blood for Dracula, which was the latter one. But this one is, it's actually, like, if you're looking for gore, if you're looking for something a little weird, and granted, this came out just a little bit before Rocky Horror Picture Show. I think it came out about 2 years before Rocky Horror Picture Show. It has a lot of the same kind of feels and quality to the Rocky Horror Picture Show, in terms of the gender bending and a lot of the weird sexuality and whatnot. I think it's a great film. I think it's a really, really great film. It's an interesting take on Frankenstein, and I think the fact that they went down this path where they sort of like, Frankenstein was not somebody who was out to try to do good, which is really the Mary Shelley story, that to try to correct the wrongs of mortality. But in this case, Frankenstein is trying to create the master race, which is really, it's pretty despicable.
Sure.
Yeah.
This is a pretty interesting way to get around at it. And a lot of people several movie reviewers took this as Paul Morrissey's take on sort of like countercultural sex revolutionaries, and this whole thing was really an indictment of hippie culture, which I thought was kind of interesting. And I guess if you really stretched it, you could say that. And that's probably the only time you will hear the Frankenstein tag being used as a countercultural sex critique of hippie culture. Probably. But I do recommend it. It's really great. It is showing right now on Shudder, and there is even a 3D version of it where the guts come like, in several scenes, the guts come flying out at you. So if you are a fan of gore, this has, which for a 1973 movie, oh my God, it has got a lot of gore.
Well, that was, at a time when, and particularly when they were willing to go X.
Yeah.
I think that was like, all right,
right.
let's go for it.
Right. Although this is my biggest knock on the film, and much like how in the Kenneth
Frankensex.
With the Kenneth Branagh. The Kenneth Branagh version of Frankenstein has, Robert De Niro as Frankenstein, which is really not that great. Joe Dallesandro, where everyone else in the film is sort of like Eastern European, and Joe Dallesandro is this like guy from this guy from New York, this tough guy, and he talks like that's how he talks. That's forget about it, and they don't bother to like try to correct his accent or try to incorporate that accent. It's like, nope, that's who he is, and that's what he's
probably
doing.
worse. He probably couldn't do it.
Right, Jew. Yeah, what's up with you, Frankenstein? All right, so yes, Andy Warhol's Frankenstein, 1973.
All right. Well, I am going to go with a movie that I saw on the festival circuit back in 2019.
I know what it is.
Me too.
It played at Overlook, and it also played at the Portland Horror Film Festival. This is the Larry Fessenden production, Depraved, which is a modern retelling of Frankenstein. Really, really well done. It preserves all the empathy of the source material while making it more sophisticated and nuanced than the classic tale. So it is certainly, it's a 2019 film. It's a jaded era where little shocks viewers, and something as timeless as the tale of Frankenstein's maniacal attempts to redefine life and death have lost their power. Fessenden, the hardest working man in the horror business, has reimagined this tale and given it a new brain, but it still remains the heart of the Shelley tale. So you're introduced to a couple of young lovers, Alex and Lucy, as they part ways for the evening, and Alex gets jumped and murdered, and then the screen fades to black. We are then introduced to our Frankenstein. He's a creature of stitched together body parts who will soon be dubbed Adam by his doctor, who is Henry. And Henry Frankenstein, they don't actually call him Frankenstein in the film, so it's just Dr. Henry. And Adam crawls off the surgery table and he looks in the mirror and sees a stranger. So he's got Alex's old brain in a new body. And he starts off little more than an automaton, sort of still major motor functions not really there. And so he's, and Henry gives him wooden puzzles and children's books to try and restart his intellect. And eventually Adam starts to recover his humanities, at least some of it. He recovers some speech, and physically he's progressing fantastically. He's become an ace ping pong player, and he also is put together out of a very fit, like a soldier's body.
Right.
But he still has the mind of a child, though he's beginning to get flickering flashbacks from his life, his previous life. And
so this is not the.
He starts out
Frankenstein.
He starts out. He's very quiet.
Yeah.
And he speaks and he's monosyllabic for early on, but he's that he's going through this training. He doesn't, unlike sort of the classic abnormal brain,
right.
That
the criminal,
is burdened with
criminal brain.
He wasn't given the mind of a psychotic criminal.
Sure.
But his brain was damaged, so he has to relearn his morals and his ethics.
Okay.
And though Henry is not a raving lunatic like Colin Clive's original Dr. Frankenstein, he's a man with issues. He was a former army medic from the wars in Afghanistan. He still suffers from post-traumatic stress syndrome. So he is doing this to try. He's using Adam as an experiment to try and save his comrades who he lost from war, a worthy cause. Again, you were mentioning this before, that classically a lot of this stuff was like trying to create this monster for good.
Right.
And then he's got a buddy named Polidori. If you know your Frankenstein lore, Polidori shows up in Bride of Frankenstein and is the sort of a wicked, unethical mentor to Dr. Frankenstein. We got that again here, but this Joshua Leonard, who's in the Blair Witch Project, Josh.
Yeah.
Josh.
But he's a money man and a financier and a big cheerleader going, we can make a lot of money at this.
Yeah.
And once he realizes that Adam is beginning to actually be able to have normal conversations, but he's still kind of messed up. Eventually, though, he still hasn't developed his ethics and his morals. His brain hasn't developed. His emotional core hasn't developed.
Right.
And there are moments where that Polidori will take him out because he's still scarred. He looks like a scar. Like he's got stitches. His body's even though he's cut, he's still kind of clearly cobbled together from other people.
Right.
They go out and he goes out in public, and then he manages to go out and he gets a date with a woman, and he's not ready for it.
Frankenhooker.
And he kills her, right? And it's like, it's very
not
much
Frankenhooker.
Not Frankenhooker. No. Want a date? No. So he is then therefore sort of technically he's out of control.
Yeah.
Because he's left. He's managed to get out. They don't know that he's out. They're trying to find him when they get him back, and things just snowball from that point, and he realizes that he's being that he's being used, and then he becomes then vengeance is on, and
Right.
it's a very sophisticated take.
It's funny. It's funny you say all that because we didn't even talk about that. I mean, amongst all the other million pieces and parts of the Frankenstein lore is the revenge piece, and that is really core to the whole thing because Frankenstein kind of takes on this like Mother Nature like metaphorical aspect where you want to mess with God, you want to play God. Then revenge will be had,
right?
And science is going to come back and bite you in the ass.
And that's what happens to Victor Frankenstein in the first film is that they get caught in the windmill. The windmill catches fire. They both burn down in this conflagration.
Right.
In this case, it's sort of there's a similar situation where all of a sudden Henry's on the run and Adam goes out and he's going to track him down and enact his own version of justice. The other thing that actually is common to a lot of Frankenstein movies, and which is another great favorite trope, is pitchforks and torches.
Oh hell
get the monster.
Hell
the town rising up, and so that there's always that kind of a risk here with the public finding out and all this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So it's
do you think the film would have been better had it been called Frankenstein Depraved or actually had the name Frankenstein in it?
I would say no.
I would say I think this is one for people to discover and find out about.
Okay.
I don't think because
we're helping.
That's
why we're here.
I think it would be too much of a burden to actually do that.
Agreed. If you put Frankenstein in it, you're going to turn some people off.
Yeah, because I think that people that the expectations, and this is it's a serious take. There's not, and Adam's not lovable, but he's a sympathetic monster because he's not. And the other thing is that he still has memories of his old girlfriend.
Right.
And he wants to visit his old girlfriend, but he doesn't look like he used to. He's a different guy, and he's he's this cobbled together monster, and he kind of knows it, and that is an emotional chasm for him, and it's so there's a lot of interesting takes going on here, and it resolves them all very nicely. I gave this 4.5 stars. This was a great.
It was good.
I thought it was great. So that is Depraved.
All right,
from 2019.
Quick time out. Quick time check. Because I know Liz has to get to bed.
31
minutes.
But
we can keep
All right. Liz, what's your number 2?
Okay, my number 2 is Gothic, the 1986 British psychological horror film by Ken Russell about the creation of, or the weekend that is supposedly where the Frankenstein book came from. So this is my way of avoiding watching Frankenstein movies. Okay, so this is, of course, about what they call like the haunted weekend. So rumor has it that Lord Byron, Percy Shelley, his wife Mary Shelley, and her sister Claire Claremont went out to Lord Byron's mansion, the Villa Diodati in Geneva, and the course of the weekend took a bunch of drugs and had a little bit of a competition to scare each other and come up with horror stories. And that out of this weekend came Frankenstein, which she wrote when she was about 21 years old. And then also Dr. Polidori, who is Lord Byron's actual doctor, wrote a story called The Vampire, which some people say is really the first documented modern vampire story.
Nice.
So this is a Ken Russell film from the 80s, so it looks like a Ken Russell film from the 80s. If you are familiar with Devils, he also did The Who's Tommy. He did Altered State.
Yep.
All have a look, and it is very 80s. Also, this stars Julian Sands as Percy Shelley, so he's a pinnacle of 80s kind of art horror movies. Gabriel Byrne is Lord Byron, and Natasha Richardson is Mary Shelley. So the soundtrack is by Thomas Dolby.
My God.
Science!
Yeah, science. Literally, science. It's alive. And I just rewatched it today. And it is a bizarre little film, but it's
all Ken Russell movies are bizarre films.
Oh my God, yeah.
Good. Yeah. Also, the way they set it up is it opens up in the 80s with people on a tour of the villa. and then it goes, kind of like back into the 1800s into the weekend, and then closes with people out on the tour learning about what the fate of these poets and authors. So if you want to fictionalize a view of what really did happen, they were all together in the weekend. Two of these big, Gothic novels came out of it, but I don't know how much sex and drugs they were really doing. But hey, they were kind of lip and things like that, so maybe. But it's Ken Russell, so there's going to be definitely more in the film.
Right.
Yeah. What was the Nosferatu movie that? Willem Dafoe did?
Yeah, with Willem Dafoe.
Yeah.
That these old movies, sometimes actually the stories behind the stories
are more fascinating than the actual movie.
Because you're so adjusted to what the fundamentals of these old classic monster movies that you kind of like let's take a look behind the curtain.
Yeah.
So, and there's been some other, shows or movies and books about the Haunted Weekend, and I always just think that's kind of fascinating when you have this group of people, and then, this one, they say, "Hey, try to scare me," and that's what she comes up with after.
Yeah, because I think it was a movie called Mary Shelley.
Yeah, they touch on it in Mary Shelley.
Yep,
they touch on it in there's one called The Haunted Summer.
Right. Yeah.
And
because
that's it. I need to see Mary Shelley.
For Gothic horror, I mean, this is what I think 1815 or something like that.
1818 is when the book was published.
Right.
And
so that might put that.
So they were together in like 1816 is when this weekend was.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's all. Yeah, sort of the luxuriant in that era. So fascinating. I haven't seen that, although
it's worth a watch, but it's bizarre.
You got to see Gothic,
yeah.
Okay, Mike.
All right, this is a 1944 American horror film that's got the Wolfman, Frankenstein, Dracula, the Hunchback, and a mad scientist. This began. Universal had all these horror properties, and they initially planned to do a film called The Chamber of Horrors, but several using basically all of their horror themed characters, and then it all sort of came together in The House of Frankenstein with Boris Karloff, Lon Chaney, and John Carradine.
Nice.
Yeah. All of them together. So the film involves Dr. Gustav Niemann, who escapes from prison, and he promises to create a new body for his poor assistant Daniel. And the two murder basically a sideshow proprietor and steal the corpse of Count Dracula. After disposing of the corpse of Count Dracula, they go to the ruins of Castle Frankenstein, where they find Frankenstein's monster and Larry Talbot, the Wolfman, who just happened to be preserved in the castle.
Sure.
Niemann, he thaws them with the promises. More promises, because he's already promised that he's going to give this one guy a new body, but he also promises Larry Talbot to cure him of the werewolf curse, when in fact he has no intentions of curing him of the werewolf curse. All he has the intentions of doing are getting at the now thawed Frankenstein monster body so that he can do additional experiments and truly take off from where Dr. Frankenstein once left his experimentation. I mean, this thing is like cram-packed full of monsters. As I say, it's, Boris Karloff, Lon Chaney, and John Carradine. I mean, you couldn't, and this is not, a lot of people, I think, when they think about John Carradine, they think about like 60s, 70s John Carradine, who was like really addled and probably out of his mind drunk. Right. This is a much earlier, much more well-reposed John Carradine, and you're getting Lon Chaney and Boris Karloff at their height. Yep. It's a great film, and it really, I mean, it's got it all. It literally has it all. I don't think I've ever seen a movie, save for maybe Cabin in the Woods, that had
that
so many
spitballs
goddamn
so many.
so many goddamn monsters thrown into a single
It's
film.
the Destroy All Monsters version of the classic Universal.
Yeah. Yep. So that is my number 2, House of Frankenstein, 1944.
All right, so my number 2 is this is Frankenstein at potentially its bloodiest.
Ooh.
This is
yeah, man.
something called Frankenstein's Army from
Oh,
2013.
yeah.
You know what? I turned this off because it was Russian.
Yeah. in protest.
Yeah. Take that, Putin.
Good for you, Liz.
Yeah. So
Good
this
for
is
you.
this is a film directed by Richard Rapphorst. And yes, in the dying days of World War II, a battalion of Russian soldiers is lured into the secret lab of a deranged scientist and forced to face off against an army of horrific flesh and metal war machines. This is like one of the things that we actually haven't stated is that in the popular vernacular, that when someone says I'm Frankensteining something, that means I'm cobbling it together of used pieces and parts. And
I really don't know what the hell I'm doing.
That's right. And so, and it's like, it is kind of shoddy workmanship. And in this case, the cobbled together things are truly horrific monstrosities. You get a clad diving suit monster dude, a drill-faced gas mask spider guy in stilts, this walking 8-ball with a swastika thing with like a brain on top and a couple of legs that's stumbling around.
Right.
It's just Mondo Bizarro patched together creatures that these Russian soldiers go in and find some brutal ends. It's a shaky cam movie that's filmed like it's in Super 8.
Right.
So it often stops and it kind of burns down and then starts back up again. And I found it, I don't like shaky cam for that reason. And it is so gory. This movie made me queasy. I don't know if it was queasy because it was so goddamn gory.
Right.
Or if it's because it's probably in addition to the fact that it's shaky cam, fits and starts kind of a thing. But,
Right.
At the same time, it has that kind of oddly a war documentary feel.
Sure.
Because it's intentionally, except for the characters are just so broad, and you know that there's like a couple of guys who don't say anything in their platoon. It's like, you guys are going to get it first, and I think the captain's going to get it because then there's going to be a power struggle for who's going to be in charge of the platoon.
Does it pull on any of the original Mary Shelley Frankenstein elements? I mean, say for the fact that they're doing experimentation.
Well, I think it's a man playing God. It's
okay.
He's creating, cobbling together things and charging them up with electricity.
Right.
But this guy, he's trying to create. He's just off his rocker.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
And it's a great reveal when you finally figure out who he's a Frankenstein.
Yeah.
And that the ending of there's a betrayal in the middle of the movie, which actually helps really sell this thing. The story is it's kind of shaky,
sure,
literally and figuratively.
Yeah.
But I think it resembles. There's another movie that's actually a better made movie, Overlord.
Overlord's awesome.
Oh yeah,
Overlord is awesome.
It feels like that's Castle Wolfenstein the movie.
Sure.
And action packed and.
So you're saying Overlord does not qualify as a Frankenstein film?
It is.
Okay.
No, it is.
Okay.
But I've talked about Overlord before, and I just wanted to bring up Frankenstein's Army because it's.
Gotcha.
I think also Frankenstein's Army really goes for it relative to my favorite one was this. It was a guy who's got the head of a propeller, right? Like an old Russian fighter plane head with a propeller, and there's some poor kid who gets sucked into this chute and gets chopped up by the propeller head thing, and it comes out, and it's just messy, and there's like lots of skulls cracked open and brains getting sliced in half and brains getting merged together, and it's really Yeah, if you like sloppy, gross, gory action
This
movies,
is like Meatball.
the Meatball Machine.
Yeah,
Meatball Machine.
It is very. It's
done Russian through Frankenstein.
right. I don't know. Actually, think that it's actually a Russian production. I think it was filmed in Eastern Europe somewhere.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it was.
Is it Russian made? Because everybody's
think it
speaking
was.
English.
Okay.
Yeah,
Um,
but I don't know.
you know, the acting is not good. But
Sure.
that's not the point.
Right.
This one is going. Let's show you these metal monstrosities. They're not, it's not the classic charming, sympathetic Frankenstein monster. These are golems made together out of some bizarro evil Nazi. It's kind of like what's the Dead Snow?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Same. I mean, it's same kind of feel. Right?
Sure.
It's Nazis are bad and
Right.
and they're probably cooking up something because that they're just up to something really, really awful that we just didn't know about because all these experiments that Nazis were always experimenting with something, and that's certainly the way that Overlord treats it too.
Yep.
Overlord is a much slicker, much better production with much better acting.
Okay.
This one is got more gonzo and actually when the shaky cam when you run into the creatures and you're racing down the hallway, your heart gets racing. It's
right.
kind of cool. Anyways,
All right.
Frankenstein's Army, 2013. Liz.
Okay, my number one pick is the 2002 Lucky McKee film May, which is probably one of the only horror Frankenstein movies that I actually really like.
Call.
Yeah. Okay, so May stars Angela Bettis as the titular May, and she's got kind of a lazy eye, and she was bullied. And one day her mom gives her this doll named Susie and says, if you can't find a friend, you just have to make one. So
Yes.
May takes that to heart as she grows up, and she's still kind of being bullied. She's kind of a creepy looking girl. She's got her lazy eyes. She's very quiet. And all she wants to do is be like Anna Faris, who plays,
Her
Holly.
sexy friend.
Yeah, her sexy friend who's like outgoing, and the boys like her, and she just wants to be like that. And she meets this mechanic played by Jeremy Sisto, and she just loves his hands. So as she's going through the movie, she's focusing on different parts of people because May is going to make herself a friend. Frankensteining ensues. So this one came out in 2002. I think it's like a little bit of a cult classic now.
It is.
Oh, for sure.
It's horror and gore, big time gore. It's sad at the end because she, even with her creation, is like, look at me to the animal, and gives up her own eye to put it in her.
That's right.
Yeah. So it's really touching and really sad. And
it's a great little film,
but
it makes you squirm because of how awkward she is.
Yeah.
Yes, she's so awkward.
She's awkward.
Angela Bettis is great, but she's very, very awkward, especially
all
in
of
this.
her interactions are awkward. Her pursuit of the gentleman is so awkward and so weird.
Well, I think Jeremy Sisto also plays. I think he at least plays it kind of cool. He doesn't like outright.
Yeah, he's not mean to her.
Hey, listen, May, I don't have time for this right now.
Right.
And he has a girlfriend.
Yeah.
But he's not mean to her, or anything like that.
Yeah.
He kind of puts up with her.
Right.
But she's weird, and he knows that.
Weirdo stalker.
Yes, a very weirdo stalker. But it's really, really good. And I think most people, our listeners, have probably seen May. But if not, this is one to go out, and it's not going to be, punching you in the face with Frankenstein traditional. But it is a Frankenstein story.
Movie.
She
Absolutely.
is, making her own friend.
She's a seamstress.
She's a seamstress, and she is
putting it to good use.
If you can't make friends, or if you don't have any friends, you make some.
It's not. She doesn't have the ability to bring them back.
No, that's the problem.
She's just
working on it,
stitching together some corpses.
That's in May too.
Yep.
All right. Speaking of punching in the face with Frankenstein, this is a film that was originally titled Frankenstein's Castle. Then it became Frankenstein 1960. Then it became Frankenstein 2000. But ultimately, they landed on Frankenstein 70, which is kind of weird since the film was done. It was called Frankenstein 1970, even though the film was done in 1958. Maybe in 1958 they thought 1970 was going to be very different. So Frankenstein 1970 originally was a double feature with the Queen of Outer Space, and it stars Boris Karloff.
All right.
Ah.
Yes, and to your point, it actually also has Nazis. Boris Karloff plays Victor von Frankenstein, who suffered torture and disfigurement at the hands of the Nazis during World War II. He's totally disfigured. The whole Frankenstein family empire has fallen apart, and so he needs to continue to support, because he's Frankenstein. He's got experiments to do. He's got work to do. He's got to turn back the hands of time. And so in order to fund his Frankenstein efforts, he allows a television crew to come in and shoot a horror film about Frankenstein at his castle in Germany. True story. And this is
True story.
This
Yeah.
is 1958. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this might be the first meta horror movie
Meta.
of all time. And so it's this great cast and crew of people, of film actors who are at Dr. Frankenstein's castle. And you got the sort of the blonde bombshell, you got the pushy agent, you got the boyfriend, you got the bumbling director, you've got sort of all this whole cast and characters. Meanwhile, little do they know that the Frankenstein legend is really true, and Dr. Frankenstein, Boris Karloff, is really honest to God trying to resurrect a Frankenstein monster in the basement while they're shooting their stupid Frankenstein movie upstairs. Those two things come colliding together towards the end of the film. But I will say this: it's got probably one of my all-time favorite opening scenes and opening sequences. And it is a very luscious film. It is shot in 1958. It's all in black and white, but it's got that great, very grand Hollywood backlot soundstage sort of setup to both the interior of the Frankenstein castle, but also the exterior shots where they're like in a swamp. And it really, really is great. Harkens back to a much, much different time. I do recommend it. Of all of the probably 15 plus Frankenstein movies I watched, I would say this was one of the better ones, because it was fun and it was campy and it was kind of interesting, and it kept in line with all of the Frankenstein tropes. But most importantly, it starred Boris Karloff.
There you go.
Yeah.
Boris.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I have two films that are very different, and both of them very well known.
Yeah.
And I'm opting to go with the fun one.
Oh, okay.
Actually, they're both fun.
Okay.
My other pick was The Reanimator.
Oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's a Frankenstein story. Yep.
Frankenstein story for sure. Herbert West playing, Jeffrey Combs playing Herbert West, Reanimator,
Playing
Lovecraft,
Dr.
all that kind of stuff.
Victor von Frankenstein.
But I have to go, because it's also on my top. It was on my top. We'll see if it's on my top 25 this next time around. It's Mel Brooks.
Oh, yeah.
Young Frankenstein.
Heck yeah.
Because it is so lovingly done, and almost I think it is Mel Brooks' most closely one for one to a source material that he ever did. I think that his I still think it's his funniest movie, and he's done a lot of funny movies.
Yeah.
But okay, but I think one of the reasons why I have to say this is because I've run into a number of people who they've never seen, because they think a 74 movie,
right?
It's like, that's an old. Do yourself a favor, see Young Frankenstein. Gene Wilder, Madeline Kahn, Marty Feldman, Peter Boyle, Cloris Leachman, Terry Garr. And Gene Hackman playing the hermit. I mean, it's like, it is. There are so many funny, laugh out loud moments, and at the same time, it's very, very close to the bone for actually the true Frankenstein thing, and they down to the way that they do it in black and white with the glow, like the soft focus whenever it goes to there's a thing in 30s movies where they backlight the like particularly the women,
right,
and then it's like soft focus on them and they glow from behind. They figured all that stuff out. The big stage productions where it looks like it's like a 30-foot high ceiling, but then you get some just pure wackiness, like if you're blue and you don't know where to go. Or Marty Feldman, when it's like walk this way. And then they all sort of bend over and walk like
that way.
hunched over Igor.
Right.
And they play off on the Gene Hackman bit with the cigar, which is actually a 1-for-1 from Bride of Frankenstein.
Right.
And they light Peter Boyle's thumb on fire, and it's like, it is. You don't have to know anything about Frankenstein to have it be funny, but if you know Frankenstein, it's doubly funny.
Right.
Every time that Cloris Leachman shows up as Frau Blüchel, and you hear this, the horse in the background, I think sometimes I get critical on Mel Brooks because I think he loses. There's a lot of his films lose focus.
Sure.
Right. Where he wants to go for the funny Jewish joke for as much of a Star Wars fan as I am, I'm not a big fan of Spaceballs.
What?
It's like, and I get, I know I get all the jokes, but it's like, it's not as on point as I'd like it to be. Where I think Frankenstein, right down to just every element that they produce, shows that he loves the source material and he understands how to take that source material and just make it just wicked funny. Do you think like society is just aged out of it, like because of the original Frankenstein is like it's almost 100 years old now, and that type of humor is an older and less used type of humor in film that we've just sort of aged out of. I don't know. I would go to the mat saying that, like,
because I still think it's funny, but I'm just wondering how many people are like actually disconnected from that and may not be able to even.
I think it's still just so. I think there's some films like.
But Mel Brooks films like Blazing Saddles, History of the World, those are all still funny.
They're still funny.
Oh yeah, I think they are too.
Or you go to something like the Airplane movie, which we don't have airplane disaster movies anymore. And so if you're growing up with that, but you watch Airplane, it's hysterical. And it's just that brand of, if you don't like that joke, I got another one coming in 2 minutes, and it's going to be fun. And it's like we're going to find a way to make you laugh. This is probably the first movie. Like I saw this so this movie came out in '74, so I was just 5 years old. When this movie came out.
Sure.
My parents took us to the drive-in. They wanted to see. It was a double feature of Young Frankenstein and Paper Moon, which was I forget who the Warren Beatty and
Ryan O'Neal.
Ryan O'Neal and
Tatum O'Neal.
Tatum O'Neal.
Yeah.
Okay. Anyways, that movie went completely over my head, but I was like, but we're going to watch Frankenstein.
Right.
And then as soon as the movie kicked on, my sister and I hid behind the seats because we got so scared.
Right.
But my mom and dad were laughing, and we'd look. We didn't get the jokes because.
And fast forward, you're a horror podcaster.
Exactly. So thank you,
that's
Mom,
where it started.
Taking me to the.
I knew that's where it started.
As much as I say that, like, Night of the Living Dead was sort of my first kind of baptism in this kind of stuff. No.
Young Frankenstein.
Young Frankenstein was the first time that I actually was ever taken to a quote unquote horror movie.
You heard it here first.
Yeah, and it's delightful, and I would say for people, because the 31 Frankenstein movie and Bride of Frankenstein, they're about an hour and 10 minutes apiece.
Yeah.
Watch them and then watch Young Frankenstein, and then you'll go, wow, that was so cool.
Okay, you got to come over and tell my boys that, because they will not watch Young Frankenstein. I cannot. I've tried for years to get them, and they refuse to watch it. They're like, nope,
It's
black
so
and white, nope, not interested, not doing it. I'm like, please just watch this movie. So you got to come over and you got to proselytize some more.
Yeah, that's right. It's like there's beauty in black in those old black and
And don't
white
tell
movies.
them that this was
But it's not
responsible for you
old
turning
black and
into
white.
a horror
It's
podcaster.
black and white by a sort, like by
Well,
a
yeah,
choice.
Choice.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, it wasn't because it was the only option.
Right.
It's
right.
not
It
that old.
It is an homage. It is
Yeah.
a perfect homage.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
100%.
Anyway, so let's recount what we got.
Oh my gosh,
on
yeah.
roster. So Liz, what did you have?
Okay, I had Hotel Transylvania Transformania #4, so it's a 2022 film. I had Ken Russell's 1986 Gothic, and Lucky McKee's directorial debut, the 2002 film May.
All right, I had 1973's Flesh for Frankenstein, also known as Andy Warhol's Frankenstein, 1944's House of Frankenstein, and 1958's, don't be confused here, 1958's Frankenstein 1970.
Okay. Yeah, that is that is a sometimes hard to connect the dots there. I have the 2019 Larry Fessenden Frankenstein in Disguise under the name Depraved. I have also the 2013, I think it was 2013. Let me double check this thing. Frankenstein's Army, yes, 2013, directed by Richard Rapphorst. A super gory, shaky cam, scrap metal and body parts war movie. And then I would top that off with the absolute classic 1974 Mel Brooks homage, Young Frankenstein. I think I would also direct folks to make sure it's like, don't cheat yourself out on the original on the 31 and Bride of Frankenstein, two of the seminal movies of the genre, and I also liked Overlord and Reanimator.
Oh my God, you crammed a lot in there.
I did. So, anyways, who's got a good tagline to go out with?
I don't have a tagline, but I do have a warning from 1958's
Okay.
Frankenstein 1970. And the warning on the film poster is, warning, Frankenstein 1970 is the most blood-freezing horror ever created. This picture may be too dangerous for people with weak hearts! Exclamation point. Beware! Exclamation point.
Nice.